God, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how much better life is. Life doesn't revolve around the bathroom, and that is huge.
For the record, I'm done trying to make y'all comfortable. For the record, you ain't trying to grow, then it's done for you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we have another case study for you. Noah, do you want to just start by introducing yourself and letting everyone know what health issues you've been experiencing?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Noah. I'm like a personal trainer, fitness trainer, like movement coach. I sort of combine all of those things into my, that's essentially what I do as a vocation. My health issues that I was experiencing, it was sort of a slow build up into a point in time where it became absolutely horrific. So it really started out with painful cramping. I had a very, very fast transit time in terms of, when I would eat food and then it would come out the other end. All of my bowel movements were essentially diarrhea. At its worst. I had severe uveitis. For anyone who's not familiar with uveitis, it's where the middle layer of your eye actually gets very inflamed. It's also known as irisitis, which is what I had. So my eyes were completely red for weeks at a time. And it was, I would have blurred vision with that. It was really, really painful. My eyes felt like they wanted to just like pop out of my head. And it was absolutely horrible. I had a good bit of joint swelling. So like my knees and my ankles specifically would get rather swollen from time to time. At its worst, I had extreme fatigue because I wasn't digesting food and I was basically running on empty all the time. And actually, when it was at its worst, there was a period of time where in 1 month I lost about 40 pounds, which that's like 20 kilos. And that was in like a 30-day period. And because of that substantial weight loss, I actually had a period of time where I lost a ton of hair. Like my hair got very, very thin because of the stress of not digesting food and the substantial weight loss. And as I sort of, prior to working with Simon, I had a period of time where it like sort of got a little bit better. But during that period of time and up until I would say rather recently, I had absolutely horrific smelling gas and my bowel movements also smelled putrid. And yeah, so that's essentially that's what I was dealing with when it was at its absolute worst.
Okay. And how long were you having these issues for?
There's a bit of history to go through with it because what I was describing was what happened when I was at my absolute worst. When I was 12 years old, and then again when I was 15 years old, I took a course of oral antibiotics. So two courses of antibiotics in a 3-year period, and then that sort of in my later teens, when I was like 17, 18, I had sort of like IBS type symptoms. I would just have like some gastrointestinal discomfort, and it would be. I would sort of have, every once in a while I would have, diarrhea and, urgent bowel movements and things of that nature. And when it was the spring of 2019, so 2 years ago, I was like sort of hanging on by a thread, essentially. I had gone vegan, I had gone plant-based, the whole 9 yards. And obviously, I didn't have a very good microbiome. So I was sort of hanging on by a thread. I still had those IBS-like symptoms every once in a while. And actually a mild case of food poisoning is what sort of caused the worst of the worst symptoms, like I described, in the previous question. So for that was when things got really, really bad. And that was when I started to have, like, every bowel movement was diarrhea. I had really, really horrific cramping. That was when the uveitis set in. And that was actually the period when I lost that 20 kilos or 40 pounds.
Okay.
So it's been, I'm 24 now, so it's been, 8 years of semi-poor digestion. But actually, since, the spring of when I got that food poisoning and everything went out of, control. So it's been, 2 years of very unpleasant digestion, led up to by like 5 or 6 years of not very good digestion. So almost 8 years.
Okay. And I know it's going to sound quite a stupid question considering the issues that you've had previously, but
Sure.
what would you say the impact of having these type of gastrointestinal problems, what impact was it having on your quality of life?
Well, so it wasn't terrible. I was before the spring of 2019 when I got that case of food poisoning. It wasn't unbearable, but it was like a very mild baseline stressor, because I would be, concerned, like, hopefully I don't get diarrhea after I eat this or this, that, or the other. Hopefully, there's a bathroom when I get there, sort of is like kind of what you think. But after, disaster struck, it was, I was actually like unable to work for at least 2 months, almost 3, where I was just at home and I was just suffering the entire time. So I couldn't work for 2 months. And then once I sort of started to, sort of recover from that a little bit, I still had, the fast transit time. My bowel movements were obviously not good. So for me, life essentially revolved around making sure that I always had access to a bathroom. I mean, and it started to turn into, oh, I have to drive, for an hour to go from here to there. What if, you start to worry, you start to get concerned about what if I have to use the bathroom, because the bowel movements, like for me, they were unpredictable and they could be incredibly urgent. So, I mean, almost to the point where you're like, if I don't, if I don't find a bathroom within X amount of time, I don't think that'd be very good. And then the last like sort of impact that I would say that it had on my quality of life was it really damaged my relationship with food, because I started to feel like no matter what I ate, it just wasn't good. And it sort of actually led me to a place of like mild orthorexia, because I started to think, well, maybe I'm just not eating clean enough, or maybe maybe if I were to take this, that, or the other out of my diet, like that would help me. Or if I were to, like limit my fat intake or something was something I thought at one point. So it definitely damaged my relationship with food. And I would also say with veganism, because I had been vegan for about 3 years when I was at my absolute worst, was around the time that I had been vegan for 3 years. So I was like, is veganism like wrong for me? Like, is it hurting me? Is it helping me? I didn't know. And that was definitely tough to deal with, for sure. And that had a huge impact on my quality of life.
Okay, so at this point then, when all of these symptoms were kind of progressively getting worse, what would you say your diet was predominantly like during that that period? So you said you were questioning whether you should eat maybe some increased fats or decreased fats, but what would you say your predominant eating pattern was like during that period of time?
And that was actually the thing that that struck me the most when I got my absolute, when I hit my absolute worst, was because that was the healthiest that my vegan diet had been. It was whole food, plant-based. I was mindful of eating like the flours, and I didn't eat refined sugars, and I didn't consume, I didn't cook at home with oil. So it was like what I would say is it was a very well balanced whole food, plant-based diet. It wasn't I mean, it wasn't extreme in the sense, like I wasn't raw vegan, but I also wasn't like super low fat. I mean, it was a very like cookie cutter version of what you would see on sort of like a, what does a healthy plant-based diet, like, you know, chart, so to speak. So it was like, it was pretty cookie cutter in terms of healthy and, you know, hitting. I wasn't limiting X or Y or Z, but that was sort of something that started to come after I had gotten so sick.
Okay. And during this period then, did you have any conversations with a doctor? And if so, what were their sort of take on some of these symptoms?
Yeah, so prior to like the food poisoning incident, where I was at my worst, I didn't really see the doctor. I didn't really, you know, I felt fine. I felt, you know, pretty good for the most part. But once I started to, you know, really have these horrible symptoms and I started to really feel terrible, I saw multiple emergency room doctors. So I went to urgent care. I even went to the emergency room at one point. And, you know, through visiting them a couple times and them trying to figure it out, I ended up speaking with a gastroenterologist, and they recommended, based on, they had a CT scan done of my intestines, and they found that my colon was inflamed. I had colitis. I mean, they didn't know if it was acute or chronic, so they just said, well, you have colitis, your colon is inflamed. You should see. Actually, the first thing that they recommended, they speculated that it was ulcerative colitis.
Okay.
And that was sort of their take on it, was that, well, this, you know, very well could be ulcerative colitis. You know, we should go in and have a colonoscopy to look at this.
Okay, so you've got all of these different symptoms going on. You've kind of spoken to your doctors. They're speculating over what it may be. So in this period of time, you know, that previous couple of years, what were some of the things that you were trying to do, or did you try during that period in terms of diet or supplements or anything like that?
So that was when I started to sort of wonder if maybe, you know, maybe my fat intake is too high, and that was an issue, or maybe, you know, maybe mostly was the fats, because I had sort of, what would you say? I had sort of stumbled upon the McDougall community of like, the fat you eat is the fat you wear, and that whole nonsense. And so I was like, whoa, maybe that's it. So I ended up trying an 80-10-10 diet, essentially, you know, 80% carbohydrates, 10% fat, 10% protein. Once my symptoms had, you know, once my symptoms had started to alleviate sort of a few months after the food poisoning, and that, it didn't really help. You know, obviously, Simon, once I started to work with you, I fully understood why, but it didn't actually help in terms of like my overall digestion. I kind of just maintained where I was at on that sort of, you know, very, very high carb, low fat diet. And I didn't try any supplements. I didn't play around. I mean, obviously outside of the, what would you say, outside of the normal supplements that you take on a plant-based diet to ensure, you know, the omegas, the B12 and the D3, outside of those, I didn't try any additional supplements.
Okay. So this obviously led you to a point where you were saying, right, I'm not really getting support from my doctors, or they couldn't help, or they weren't sort of giving you enough direction. And you said, right, I'm going to try and take some of this into my own hands.
Yes.
So you obviously did some sort of testing in terms of stool testing and SIBO testing and all of that. And as a result of that, I subsequently put you on a sort of a plan of action, and you know, we started to work together about moving some of these type of issues in the right direction. So how soon into that plan would you say you started to kind of notice some level of improvement?
I would say 2 weeks at the absolute earliest, but 3 weeks was when I started to feel a difference in my digestion, and I started to feel better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were the initial kind of reduction in symptoms that you started to notice?
The smell of my gas and bowel movements changed. So it it wasn't so unbelievably horrific smelling. It had started to change, and also my transit time started to increase. So it would take a little bit longer for my meals to digest. Was definitely those were definitely the two things that I noticed right away.
Okay. And then subsequently after that, what did you then start to notice?
Essentially, it was slow and steady improvements. So, over the following months of, after those initial few weeks, those two things primarily were the ones that improved the most. I mean, it was my gas started to, there were reductions in my gas. So I wasn't as frequently gassy. Prior to that, it was like, I wish I was exaggerating, but like every 5 minutes I would be passing gas to some extent. And, some of them were absolute rippers. So it was really, really nice to not have to feel like I was constantly gassy and to feel like embarrassed because like, oh gosh, like, I'm constantly just passing gas. And then, I have these, unpredictable random bowel movements. So those were the two things that slowly kind of, but very steadily, increased in terms of getting better. I noticed that my gut motility just steadily slowed down, and I started to notice that my food was getting more and more digested, once it was by the time that it got to the toilet, and that was amazing.
Okay. And in terms of the plan itself, how did you find that? I mean, what things did you like, and maybe some of the things you maybe didn't like so much?
Yeah, absolutely. I was the plan that we worked out, obviously my individualized plan, but the plan that we worked out was the Low Oxalate Plan. Come to find out, because I took the courses of antibiotics, I was having difficulty with oxalates, which is where I saw issues on that 80-10-10 diet that I was doing, because I was still eating so many foods that were rather high in oxalates. So removing the oxalates from removing these higher oxalate foods and getting my total oxalate consumption down, it removed some of my favorite meals and some of my dietary staples. So I'll give you the bad before I give you the good, but the bad is heavily outweighed by the good, just as a caveat. So it removed some of my favorite meals and dietary staples. I had issues with feeling full or satiated for long periods of time, because the higher oxalate foods, just by design, are some of your nuts and seeds and some of your better fat sources that do help keep you full for longer. So going off of that, my fat sources were basically avocados, like sunflower seeds, sun butter, and pumpkin seeds were like the big three outside of flax seeds. So I was still getting plenty of healthy fats. It was slightly expensive to do it that way because in the States, avocados aren't super cheap. And the last thing that I would say is the supplement regimen that we had worked out based on my individual issues was like somewhat large. There was kind of a lot going on, and it was like timing, and it was rather meticulous. But I'll go into the good stuff now. On the flip side of that, with the supplements, once I made a routine out of the supplement, it was a habit. It was habitual, and it was unbelievably easy. You just have to, it was sort of that initial transition of like, okay, I have to take this at this time and then this at that time and do this 10 minutes before me. So it was meticulous, but once it became a routine, it was unbelievably easy. And one of the things I loved about the plan that I was absolutely elated about was that I didn't have to incorporate animal products. That was something that I was very, very opposed to doing. And that was something that I had heard a lot of people around me were saying. They were saying, well, you should eat animal products and you'll feel better. And it was sort of actually something that even my doctors were skeptical of. They were like, oh, well, you're vegan. Okay, well, are you sure that that's the way to go? Are you sure that that's the best thing to do? And that's another reason that I was like, okay, I need a different opinion. Another thing I really liked about the plan was that there was lots of fermented foods. Even prior to working with the plan, I really enjoyed sauerkraut. And another thing that I really liked about the plan was that I was able to expand my horizons with fermented foods. So I ended up trying tons of fermented foods that I've never tried before that I ended up like loving, that I still will continue to eat like post the plan. And on that note, the plan still allowed me to eat like a ton of my favorite foods. So like I was able to still eat potatoes, which is a godsend. And so tons of different vegetables. And so it was easy, and I really liked it in the sense that I was still able to eat a nutritionally complete and diverse diet, whilst also giving my digestive system the break that it needed. So yeah, those were definitely the things that I enjoyed about the plan and that I didn't so much enjoy. But I mean, the negative was not really that like I didn't enjoy it. It was just there was just the supplement portion of it and the timing of all of that. But like I said, once it was routine, it was easy.
Okay, perfect. And I like what you were saying there as well, in that in terms of these plans, and I probably said this to you initially, the aim of these type of plans isn't to modify your diet to control symptoms unless it's absolutely needed. The aim of these type of plans is to kind of strategically place supplements and or modify your diet and let all of that take care of the heavy lifting, so you're not having to pull lots of different foods out of your diet to control symptoms, because inevitably you get healthy via diversity in the diet. You don't get healthy via pulling everything out of your diet and restricting everything and going on stupid I'll call them stupid loosely, stupid kind of juice cleanses or water fasts or drinking urine or any of that voodoo witchery that you see on the internet today. Okay, so we obviously got you on this plan, things started to improve, and then obviously over the last couple of months we've got you back to sort of some level of normality. So what would you say then, in terms of where you're at now? So as of today, where are your symptoms at from where they were?
Sure. All of the foods that we had sort of like taken out of the equation for a brief period of time have been reintroduced, including gluten. So everything that I used to eat and more is a part of my diet. My digestion is by far the best that it's ever been. And all of my symptoms that were like at their absolute worst, like the uveitis is gone, is a thing of the past. My transit time is fantastic. I mean, my bowel movements are they're I wouldn't say predictable, but they're consistent, and they are consistently good. They're consistently they're great. They're excellent. So honestly, I mean, because I took those antibiotics when I was so young, I don't particularly have a memory, so to speak, of what my digestion was like. It really wasn't something I had paid attention to, but I that's why I would argue that it's probably the best that it's ever been, because I was so young when I took them and then had issues ever since. So
okay. And how does this all translate now into sort of quality of life for you?
Oh God, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how much better life is. Life doesn't revolve around the bathroom, and that is huge. I don't have to worry about, oh gosh, what if I have an unbelievably urgent bowel movement when I, am on the way to here, or once I get there, or, oh geez, I don't want to go here and have a bunch of gas, and that's really embarrassing, and I'm ashamed of that. It's a completely different world that I live in now, because I feel free. I feel genuine freedom when it comes to just being able to live life. I'm not handcuffed to the bathroom. I'm not handcuffed to the toilet. I'm not, consumed by guilt of the fact that, sometimes I can't control my gas. Like that's not a factor. Those aren't factors anymore. And that's been the most amazing part. And because my digestion is so much better now, obviously I'm I'm a personal trainer. I help people with their fitness. I help people get fit and get healthy. And there was a lot of there's a lot of shame tied up in the fact that, you know, I wasn't healthy when I was telling people, like, you need to eat more fruits and vegetables and whole grains and nuts and seeds to be healthy. You know, when I was eating strictly those foods and I wasn't healthy. So there was like sort of a cognitive dissonance there. And that was really tough to deal with for a long while, because, you know, people would look at me and they'd be like, okay, I mean, you're not really healthy, but you're telling me that I need to do what you do to be healthy. So that didn't really add up, you know, for a good amount of time for people. And so I now, like, I feel confident telling people to eat more plant-based for their health, for the environment, you know, for the animals, if that's your prerogative. And not feeling like embarrassed or ashamed or hypocritical to tell people, to give people that message. That's been unbelievably positive for me as well. And also on the digestion note, you know, being a personal trainer now, my progress in the gym is better as well, because I can make sort of those, you know, those gym gains, so to speak, with more ease, because I'm actually digesting food and I'm able to, you know, like, absorb the nutrients from the food, and that gives me better energy, that regulates my hormones better. It gives me, like, it's excellent. And the last thing I would say is that my relationship with food is the healthiest that it's ever been, because, you know, when you come from such a dark place where you're like, oh gosh, like, I think my food is hurting me, you know, it's so nice to truly be able to, you know, be grateful. And it's put me in a place of true gratitude in terms of all of the food that's on my plate. So that's kind of where we're at now.
Okay, perfect. And let's just say someone's watching this, you know, a few days from now.
That's actually, sorry to interrupt you, but that's where I was. I actually, you know, when I stumbled across your channel, I was like, somebody else has to be feeling the way that I'm feeling. And these case study videos were what made me want, like, were what convinced me, so to speak, of working with you, because you had these videos of people who were, you know, unbelievably, you know, like, in unbelievable pain and suffering, and then they were able to work with you and their digestion, just like any of their health issues. And there's so many health issues that are gut microbiome based, and, you know, so I'm just, that's actually what convinced me to start working with you, was what convinced me to deviate from the traditional medicine route, so to speak.
Okay. I mean, look, I appreciate what you're saying. I would say a couple of things to what you've just said. So obviously, like I say on all of these types of videos, somebody's conventional doctor, that should always be the first port of call. And also, absolutely, through that process. And if that process is not helping you or giving you the support or direction that you need, then that's when you look outside of that realm. But your conventional doctor should always be that starting point.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. But, you know, in my scenario where they're like, well, it's ulcerative colitis, we think, so therefore we want to give you an incredibly expensive invasive procedure that you probably don't need. That was sort of when I was like, okay, I need to step back and maybe explore some other options. But that being said, up until then, they had been unbelievably helpful, and they had been, you know, they were compassionate, and they gave me everything that they could within the paradigm of, you know, and within their resources. So that is, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I would never say, you know, from the get-go, just go, you know, an alternative medicine route. Always conventional, always.
No, absolutely. And the other point that I was going to make there, and I always reiterate this on these types of calls, there are lots and lots of different nutritionists, dietitians, doctors, functional doctors, who will be able to do sort of testing on you, who will be able to give you support and guidance and stuff like that. This is not a sales pitch from me. I'm just a very run-of-the-mill kind of nutritionist. Nothing that I do is exceptionally good or different to what other people will do out there. I'm just trying to simplify things and kind of spoon-feed people in a way that enables them to understand that some of these more extreme measures, longer term, are just going to create additional problems. So just on that point then, So like I was saying then, if someone's watching this video sort of a few days from now in a similar situation to what you were, I was, a lot of other people were with gastrointestinal problems, what would the advice be from you to somebody in that situation be?
I would say, obviously, speak with your conventional doctor. You know, bring your problems to them, and give them, you know, let them do everything within their power. And if it's within their power to fix it very quickly and easily, then fantastic. But that being said, I would say recognize the limitations that are built into at least the Western medical system. I would say, so in my case, it was, the narrative that I was given was, well, we're rather certain that it's ulcerative colitis. Therefore, you need a ridiculously expensive procedure for us to figure out where we're going to go from here. And for me, I said, okay, like I'm not saying don't get a colonoscopy. I just wasn't in a space where I believed that I needed one. And so I would say, if you're in a position like I was, I would say advocate for yourself and for your body. And I would say, don't just, what would you say? Don't just accept the first narrative that you are given. Don't just assume that the first narrative that somebody gives you around your issues is the correct one. Because another thing that I would say is, when I spoke with my doctors, I asked them if they had some of the tests that you offer, Simon. I asked them if I could do a SIBO test, and they couldn't get that to me. I asked them if I could do an organic acids or a stool test, and I couldn't get any of the tests. So that was sort of one of the reasons that I wanted to, you know, sort of speak with you first and take the tests first, is because I didn't have access to them otherwise. I wasn't able to get my hands on them. And so I would say, you know, first off, you know, try and get the whole picture, you know, through tests, through, you know, very, very in-depth and accurate testing. But at the same time, testing that isn't dangerous and invasive to a certain point. And also, if somebody's in a similar position to me, I would say, talk to you, Simon, you know, take the tests, you know, at least at the bare minimum, take the tests and have a 1-hour consult with you to figure out what's actually going on with your body. And then if you don't choose to follow the plan that you hypothetically make for people, Simon, at least take your results and your knowledge and your understanding that you gain from the tests and the consult with you, and take that to your nutritionist, your dietitian, and see what they can come up with and see what they work with you to create, to help heal yourself, really.
Yeah, no, perfect. And like I say, there are hundreds of thousands of very good nutritionists, dietitians, doctors out there who will be able to help you. So by no means do you need to obviously come to me. There are plenty of good people out there. So last thing then, over the last sort of 12, 24 months, to a much lesser degree now, I think we've seen the stem of the flow, but there have been a lot of maybe ex-vegans who have basically said categorically, the vegan diet caused my gut issues, the vegan diet caused my brain fog, the vegan diet did this, the vegan diet did that.
Yeah, everything under.
Yeah, no, exactly. Given your sort of experience, what would you say your take on some of those people are? And I always say this in this situation as well, I'm not judgmental towards those people. You can only know what you can know. And if you don't understand that SIBO is a problem, and you go to a doctor who doesn't understand that's a problem, then
or you can't get the tests from your doctor, you know, like in my case. So
yeah, absolutely. I can understand from somebody from the outside who says, well, actually, I'm eating very healthily, I'm eating, you know, whole food, plant-based diet, and I'm struggling here. I can understand very quickly how someone would deduce from that the vegan diet did that to me. But what would your take be on that kind of that scenario where there are some people out there promoting carnivore diets or keto diets now because they've had a bad experience? What would you say your kind of your thought process around all of that is?
You have to be in a, and this is what I learned personally, is you have to be in a position to be able to digest fiber and plants and everything that you are eating. And so one thing that I see a lot in the sort of the ex-vegan community is they come to veganism with health issues, and they sort of look at veganism as like, well, this will fix it. Well, no. That's what I would say is no, you can't come to something. And that's essentially what I did. I came to veganism with a severely reduced gut microbiome. I treated my body horrifically when I was in my late teens, and alcohol, recreational drugs. I mean, like, you can't come to something in a state of in an unhealthy state and expect it to fix everything that's going on. It's not oxalates, salicylates, or histamines that ruin your health. It's everything. It's the whole picture. I would say that to think that the vegan diet didn't fix all of my problems, therefore it's null and void and it doesn't work for anyone. I feel as though that's like incredibly reductionist, and it doesn't encompass the whole picture. And you really have to look at, when it comes to the human body and your health, you have to look at the entire picture. I mean, and that's mental health included, not just physical health. So yeah, I would say definitely don't view the vegan or the plant-based diet as a saving grace to health problems, because like I experienced, if you come to it with a severely reduced gut microbiome, you will not be able to digest plants, and your health will not get better. If in my case, I hung on basically by a thread until I got a mild case of food poisoning, and then everything spiraled out of control. So just look at the whole picture and truly understand what is required of your body to be vegan. And once you understand what is required of your gut microbiome and your body to be vegan, that is when I would say, take the tests and understand what's going on so that you can figure out whether or not veganism is a good fit for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you've hit another nail on the head in that diets can be a saving grace for a lot of people. So if you've got health problems, then going plant-based can absolutely help with some of those issues in some people. So if you've got skin issues, plant-based diet for some people can be amazing. If you've got gastrointestinal problems, plant-based diet for some people can be amazing. If you've got autoimmune type problems, that type of diet can be amazing. But no diet is kind of a magic bullet. There will be people out there, no matter what they eat, and these are a small proportion of populations. No matter what they eat, it's all about sort of maintaining sort of a quality of life for those people, and there is no kind of magic fix for for some people.
No.
So yeah, look, I just want to say it's been a pleasure working with you over the last couple of months. I appreciate your time today. I think it will help a lot of people, particularly people in your situation or as you were a few months back. So yeah, again, just to reiterate that, it's been a pleasure working with you. Thanks for your time today, and yeah, just keeping contact over the next few months.
Absolutely. Excellent.